Have you ever wondered about the catalyst that sparked significant changes in India under British rule? The answer might surprise you. It's the Charter Act of 1813. This act, also known as the East India Company Act of 1813, was a milestone legislation passed by the British Parliament. It renewed the charter of the East India Company for another 20 years and for the first time defined the constitutional position of British Indian territories. The backdrop to this act was the continental system of Napoleon Bonaparte in Europe, which prohibited the import of British goods into French allies. This had a severe impact on British traders and merchants, who subsequently demanded a share in the British trade in Asia and the dissolution of the East India Company's monopoly. The British Parliament responded by allowing British merchants to trade in India under a strict licensing system through the Charter Act of 1813. However, the company retained its monopoly in trade with China and the tea trade. The Charter Act of 1813 was rich in provisions. It asserted the Crown's sovereignty over British possessions in India and extended the company's rule for another 20 years. The act ended the company's trade monopoly except for the trade in tea, opium, and with China. It gave local governments the power to tax people subject to the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. The company's dividend was fixed at 10.5%, and the act also bestowed more powers on the courts in India over European British subjects. The impact and significance of the Charter Act of 1813 were far-reaching. It marked the beginning of a new phase in British rule in India, with the Crown asserting its sovereignty over the British possessions. The act ended the East India Company's trade monopoly, opening up India's trade to other British merchants and boosting economic activity. Furthermore, the act had profound implications for the administration of justice and taxation in India. It empowered local governments to tax people subject to the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, thereby strengthening the revenue system. The act also vested more powers in the courts in India over European British subjects, bolstering the judicial system. In conclusion, the Charter Act of 1813 was a landmark legislation that paved the way for the transformation of India under British rule. It extended the East India Company's rule for another 20 years and brought about significant changes in governance, trade, and the judicial system. This act laid a robust foundation for the subsequent administrative and economic reforms that were to follow in the coming decades.